Hey there, Happy New Year, Joanne fans. It's so good to see you. I'm Vickie Howell. I am the creator and host of The Knit Show. And as I am always bi-monthly here on the Joanne Facebook page and later on the Knit Show YouTube channel, I have partnered up with my friends at Joanne to bring you some kind of yarny goodness. And since it's a new year, we decided new year means new skills. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on this month and next month is some kind of new technique, either knitting or crocheting to kind of, or maybe finger knitting or some kind of yarny project that maybe kicks it up a notch because sharing is caring and we love learning, right? So throughout the years, I have consistently gotten, well, many questions, but one question in particular, which is, how do I use double pointed needles, which are called DPNs if you're looking at the abbreviation? You can see over my shoulder. So double pointed needles look like this, and their purpose is for knitting in the round, specifically smaller circumferences. Many people or many projects call for circular needles, which are on a cord, but they only come in a limited amount of sizes, meaning lengths of cords. So the cool thing is with double pointed needles is it doesn't matter how large or how small the circle is you need to create, you can always use them. It's just a matter of how many of these you use. Okay, so first of all, let's talk types. There are all kinds of different types of materials used to make double pointed needles, but I'm going to focus really on the ones that you can find in the aisles or online through Joanne. So there are a few brands when I'm walking down the aisles that I've noticed. First off, Clover. They have Takumi needles. I've only worked for them for years and couldn't get the name out. They have Takumi needles that are made from bamboo. So these are great. They're wooden. They warm in the hands. Solid action. You'll also find some from Boy and also Susan Bates that are aluminum. And then online, I don't have a full set of these, but I'll just show you what the different types. They come in different types, just like straight needles do. I've also seen, and maybe in your local Joanne store, Lion brand has plastic ones. So all of them are made exactly the same way, right? They're a straight stick with points on either ends. So how do you know when to choose which material? Well, honestly, every single type will get the job done. So in part, it's just preference. I happen to like warming wood most of the time, but sometimes there are certain materials of yarns that really work much better on a metal. And conversely, sometimes you don't want to use a super slick metal. And I'll give you an example. If you're working with a really slick yarn, especially if this is one of your first projects and there's already kind of a learning curve, that can make the yarn so slippery that it can come off easier. So a lot of it is just about knowing which yarn and which needle, but you don't have to worry about knowing that ahead of time. A lot of it just takes experience. And like I said, every type will do the job. So you go and you pick your size, and you would do that the same way that you would pick straight needles or circular needles. You read the size that's on the pattern or the recommended size on the yarn label. And if you're making a project that has to fit something, you want to make sure and check your gauge. So you may need to go up or down a needle size based on how you're knitting. I see some people coming on to watch. Hi, Jamie. Hi, Michaela. So nice to see everyone. If you know anybody that would be interested in learning how to use double pointed needles, or maybe just wants a little refresher course, please share this video. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to be going over how to use these in a second. And on the Joanne blog, which will be posted here in the comments section, I also have provided a pattern for you to, let me not put these upside down, to put your new skills to work with. So I have these Mismatchy mitts. There's a pattern for them on the Joanne Creative Spark blog, like I said before, and these are a great project to learn how to use double pointed needles, but there's a little bit of a twist. This project, because you need an arm or a thumb opening, instead of dealing with shaping or putting stitches on waste yarn, these are made by knitting in the round up until here and knitting back and forth just for the thumb portion and then resuming back in the round. And I see that the pattern for these Mismatchy Wrist Warmers has just been posted in the comment section, so thank you for that. And again, if you have any questions, you can find another explanation on the Joanne blog, including sort of simple photos. And then you can always post them here. I will come back if I don't see them here while we're doing this demonstration. I will come back to the comments section and answer any questions, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube later. Okay, so if you're just joining us today, we are demystifying DPNs, or as they're also called, double-pointed needles. All right, so they come in sets of 5 or 4. You have to use at least 4 because you need to be able to make in the round, right? So you need your project to be able to go into a round, which this doesn't really make sense, but means that you at least need a triangle. You need for the stitches to be able to connect in one way. But some people prefer to use 5, some use 4. I prefer to use 4. However, if your project grows and grows and grows, let's say you start out small and you're increasing, you might want to add needles. And the cool thing about working with double pointed needles is there's really no limit. Years ago, I used to host this show called Nitty Gritty, and I had a guest, I can't remember her last name. Her name was Tina, and she made these great boots where she started with the sole of a boot, and she had drilled holes all the way around. Well, she needed to she was going to knit from the sole up. So she started with maybe 15 sets or maybe 15 needles all the way around, and then less and less and less. I'm getting ahead of myself. My point being is that they're really, really versatile, and they're not as scary as some people feel that they are, because even though you have 4 or 5 needles that you're working with on the project, you're never ever working with more than 2 at a time. Got it? Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We are going to flip the camera around. When I say we, I mean I. We are going to focus on learning just the basics of how you load your stitches onto your needles and get started. So I'm going to flip the camera around and we'll go from there. And if you have questions, again, just post them in the comment section. All right, so for this project, I am using Big Twist Premium Worsted. It comes in loads of colors, and it's just a solid sort of go-to kind of yarn. All right, so I'm going to start with a set of needles. And like I said, I prefer to use 4, so I'm going to just cast on with 4, but you do you. And I'm going to grab a skein of yarn. I tend to slide the label off and pull from the outside. You can, however, pull from the inside. Your call. All right, so I recommend casting on stitches to only one needle instead of attempting to cast on to all needles. You absolutely can cast on to all needles. I just find that it's much easier this way. So you would take your tail just as you would if you were casting on to straight needles, and then you can use your preferred cast on method. It really doesn't matter unless the pattern calls for a specific cast on. Just do whichever one that you are most comfortable with. So I call this one the single tail cast on, but like I said, you do whatever you want. So you're going to cast on your stitches. And for the project that I have posted, depending on what size that you're making, that's going to be 24 or 28 stitches. So you would cast on all of them to this one needle. Catherine says she's making socks, so that means you're a double-pointed needle pro, unless you're making them on 2 circulars, which maybe we should do that as a future tutorial too. By the way, while I'm casting on these stitches, if there is a new knit, crochet, weaving, needle punching, crewel, any sort of yarn-related tutorial that you're interested in learning about, a new skill for this new year, please post it in the comment section. I would love to hear your suggestions, and maybe we will choose one for a future video. Okay, so I'm not really counting at this point because I'm chatting. You know, it can be a little conversational. But let's just say that we've got our desired amount of stitches onto the needle. Now what we need to do is we need to distribute these stitches evenly around or on 2 additional needles. So to do that, we're going to start at the end. So here's the beginning where your working yarn is. You want to start at the opposite end of the needle, and you want to slide them purlwise. And if you have an even amount of stitches as is called for in my Mismatchy mitts, then it'll be super easy because you'll just divide that by, actually it doesn't even matter if it's even, you just need to be, if it's divisible by 3, you'll have the exact same amount of stitches on all needles. If not, no big deal, just make them relatively even. Okay, so I have, let's just say I have around a third of the stitches on this first needle. Now I need to bring in the next needle. So this is the part that might feel a little counterproductive, like it would make sense like, oh wait, do I need to go over here? No, you need to go where you just left off. So you're done with loading this one. You can just let it hang free and easy, and then you can slide the next round of stitches onto the next needle. And if you've come in late or you feel like you need to watch this a little bit slower, please know that the recorded version of this will be available on both the Joanne Facebook page right here where you're watching it now, or later on the Joanne Vickie Howell playlist on the Knit Show YouTube channel. Okay, once you have your stitches divided evenly amongst your needles, lay them on a table or a flat surface of one form or another. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that your stitches are all facing the same way. So I'm going to kind of tilt the camera for a second. What I like to do is I like to sort of run my finger along, and you can see that the bottom bumps of the stitch are all facing the same direction inward. That's what you want to make sure to do, because just like if you were working with circulars, if you join your round and it's twisted, there is no undoing that forever and always. So we see that we're in good shape here. I'm going to move my yarn to the opposite side just to get it out of the way. Okay, this is when you introduce your final needle. To join the round, if we're looking at these needles, we've got needle 1, needle 2 is in the middle, needle 3 is on my right-hand side. So I'm going to pick up my needles, and stay with me here. This is the most persnickety part of the entire process, but once you've done it, there's no looking back. Okay, so you want to insert your 4th needle into the first stitch on needle 1. So 1 and 1, right? That's easy to remember. Using whatever stitch the pattern calls for. The pattern for the Mismatchy mitts is a knit 2, purl 2, so I'm going to knit. Then you're going to take the working yarn, which is actually still attached to this needle 3, and you're going to knit that stitch. Okay, that's the only time where you're kind of balancing a bunch of needles. From now on, you're only working with whatever 2 needles are in your hands. Okay, so the rest are kind of free and easy hanging. All right, and then you just work your stitches as you normally would. So like I said, I'm working a knit 2, purl 2 rib for the pattern that's on the Joanne blog, but whatever pattern stitch that the pattern is that you're making, you would do that. So I'm going to show you what happens when you get to the end of a needle. Okay, you know that you're done, much like with straight knitting with a needle, when your needle on your left-hand side is empty. So we're just going to rotate the piece to the next needle, switch that empty needle so it's in your right hand, and continue. Let's see, I just knit, so I'm on a purl, and continue working the stitches. Continue around. Until you get to your last needle. Okay, rotate again. And for one last time, let's see, I'm on a purl again. I'm going to work the stitches. Okay, I didn't actually count my stitches before I went on, so I would normally end with 2 purls for the stitch pattern, but you catch my drift. Okay, so now I've worked all the way around. I know that I'm at the end of the round because I'm back where my tail is. You don't need a stitch marker when you work on DPNs because when you get to the end of your last needle, you are at the end of the round. So to continue around, you would just rotate and you would lather, rinse, repeat. You would just start working again. And that's really all there is to it. You're never working with more than 2 needles at a time. Super easy. Okay, so that's all that you need to know to actually use DPNs or double pointed needles. So if you're not making this particular project, these mitts, you don't really need to know this part, but you might find it interesting anyway. So here's your DPN knowledge. I'm going to move that over, and I want to talk specifically about what I mentioned earlier in this video, how these mitts, and I've made them mismatched. You can make them with the same colors if that's your thing. And again, how you make them will be in the instructions on the Joanne blog. These mitts are worked in the round in reverse stockinette. Now, I want to make one more point about working in the round in general on either double pointed needles or circulars. When you're working in the round, you're never working on the wrong side of the fabric, which is in here. So that means if you're working in stockinette stitch, you don't ever have to purl. You only work the right side, which is all knits, and it will turn out as a knit stitch would if you were knitting and purling on flat fabric, as goes for the stitch that's called for in these mitts. This is reverse stockinette. So in reverse stockinette, in the round only, you would purl every round. When you're working flat, you would purl on the right side and knit on the wrong side because it's exactly opposite of stockinette stitch. Okay, why am I telling you all of this? Well, I'm glad you asked, because for these mitts, the pattern calls for you to work as instructed up for the first 3 inches. So I've worked the cuff, and then I've worked with the reverse stockinette part of the mitt that's called for, but now I'm where the thumb opening needs to be. So I've just finished a round with my contrasting color. I'm at the end of the round, and so normally if I were working in the round, I would keep going, but I want to stop because I want to split this area for the thumb right now. So instead of picking up the next color, which would be this turquoise, and beginning to knit this way, I'm actually going to knit back on needle 3, the one that I just stopped knitting. So normally if we're working the round, we work needle 1, 2, 3. If we're working flat, we are then going to go back and work 3, 2, 1 on the back side. But as I just said before, reverse stockinette is worked differently, or any stitch pattern is worked differently when you're working flat versus in the round. So I want to actually knit on this wrong side to continue creating that stitch pattern. So you're actually knitting on the wrong side of the fabric. Okay, I'm going to the next. You're still using the double pointed needles in the same way right here at this point. And again, never, let me move this yarn, never using more than 2 needles. And reverse stockinette gives you this bumpy looking pattern. It's just a design choice. You could also just work these mitts in regular stockinette, knit every row instead of purling every row, if that is more your jam. Okay, because I'm working on the reverse side of the fabric, I'm knitting, and I'm going to show you this entire row. And now we're working in rows instead of rounds. I'm at what would have been the beginning of the round if I was working in the round, but I've worked that last needle, so 3, 2, 1. Now I'm going to flip it around. I'm on the right side. I have to use the same color, so your stripe pattern will change to 2 by 2 because that's where my working yarn is. And I'm and I will knit, or excuse me, purl, because it's reverse stockinette, I will purl back. And you would just continue all the way around in that manner. And you can see here how it's starting to split. And you would just continue that for as long as the pattern calls for, or as long as as tall as you'd like your thumb opening. So you would just go all the way around. And that's really all there is to it. And what that does is that creates this opening right there for your thumb. And when you're done, with your opening, then you would just continue, you would resume knitting back in the round. And for this, that just means going back to reverse stockinette, and then we move to 1x1 ribbing, and then we bind off. And that's all there is to it. Really, really simple. It seems a lot harder than it is. If it's kind of blowing your mind right now, don't worry, give it a try. I don't know about you, but I find that it's a lot easier to learn these kind of skills if I'm doing it with needles and hands. Okay, I'm going to push my camera around again. If you have any questions, like I said, please post them in the comments section. And if you're feeling a little spicy, you get this down, you've done this and you're ready to move on, please make sure that you check out the Knit Show on YouTube or go to theknitshow.com. If you look, there is a project on, I believe it's the vintage episode, that are also some really nice wrist warmers. They've got a little lace detailing and picot edging, so that'll be a step up. I believe double pointed needles are also used on some socks in the holiday episode, episode 110. So give it a check out. If you make the mismatch mitts, please tag at Vickie Howell and at Joanne so that we can see your works in progress and your finished mitts. We love that. If you have any other skills that you would like to learn from me that are yarn related, I can really do any crafts, but let's focus on yarn. Please post that. All right, thank you so much once again. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks right back here on the Joanne Facebook page. Thank you. Bye.